Today, we're diving into a topic that is close to my heart as a counselor: the irreplaceable value of having both a mom and a dad in a child's life. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. In today's modern world, does a child really need both a mother and a father? Can't single parents, same sex couples, or even individuals using artificial insemination raise perfectly healthy children? Well, I have to throw you a big fat no on that one. And today, I'm here to tell you why. I'm Kelly Case, and this is the Unhindered Podcast. In America today, too many government leaders are actively trying to destroy the traditional family structure. Those efforts, combined with the degradation of our culture and the fallen nature of humanity, has resulted in us having a very different world. What some call the modern world or the modern family. They even made a show about it. Women are having babies on their own through artificial insemination. Same-sex couples are using IVF and surrogates. And countless people are having children outside of marriage or even committed relationships. And all too often, these decisions are made with little thought to the long-term consequences for the child that they are bringing into the world. I understand that we live in a broken world, and an intact family isn't always possible. Tragedies happen, such as a parent or even both parents dying, a parent being addicted to drugs or incarcerated, and maybe a child is being raised by their grandparents, or situations where one parent needed to flee an abusive situation. I've been in that situation myself, so I'm not here to condemn you. In fact, this episode is for people who haven't yet brought a child into the world. I want them to know that having both a mom and a dad should be the birthright of every child. When we intentionally deprive a child of one or both of their biological parents, we're giving them a disadvantage right from the start. Despite what culture would have us believe, men and women are not interchangeable. In fact, we're fundamentally different. And those differences matter big time when it comes to raising kids. Women who are blessed with higher oxytocin levels are wired for emotional connection and nurturing. And men have higher testosterone levels, which incline them to encourage risk-taking and physical activity with their children. We're all created in the image of God. Male and female, He created us. And we each display different aspects of who God is. And it takes both a male and a female coming together as one to adequately represent the image of God to a child. Both are necessary. As women, we carry those babies in us for 9 months. We feel them grow and kick. And then we bring them into the world through the incredible act of childbirth. So it's no wonder that we have this natural instinct to care for our infants and nurture our infants in a way that men simply can't replicate. But as our kids grow and change, their needs shift. And sometimes they need a little more of that motherly love and support. But at other times, they're going to need their dad to step in, to guide them toward independence. Fathers tend to encourage children to take chances and push limits, while mothers tend to be more protective. We tend to be a little more cautious. It's this constant interplay of masculine and feminine energy that is what helps a child navigate all the different stages of life properly. Each approach is essential for a child's healthy development. When either parenting style is extreme, it can have an unhealthy effect on the children. Not every situation is great. But together, the different approaches of a mother and a father in a balanced way are there to give balance and nurture to the child, to give him confidence, to give her confidence. Now, I'm not saying that every mom is a shrinking violet and every dad is a rough and tumble coach. But generally speaking, mothers excel at creating a safe, loving space, whereas fathers tend to push their kids toward independence. The truth is, kids need both. They need a mother's gentle touch and a father's firm guidance. It's a perfectly balanced recipe. Each parent, mom and dad, provides a unique contribution that's essential for the optimal and healthy development of a child. A mother cannot be a father, and a father cannot be a mother. Also, a healthy two-parent household gives a child a blueprint for their future marriage. Kids learn by watching us, often subconsciously soaking up the intricacies of how we communicate, how we resolve conflict, how we love, how we respect one another. In a single-parent home, the blueprint is incomplete or completely absent. It's kind of like building a house with only half the tools. It's a critical lesson in the life of a child that goes unlearned. And I see kids taking on misplaced roles in these single-parent households. See it all the time. Often they become a substitute mate or an emotional crutch for the single parent, taking on roles and responsibilities that they shouldn't have to bear. They may share a bed with their mom their whole life, never learning how to be separate and independent from her. That's not healthy. They might feel like they're abandoning her if they want to be independent. They want to say, go off to college or start a family of their own. Statistics show that children from what's called intact families have better academic performance, have better physical and emotional health, and are less likely to exhibit risky behaviors. They're also less likely to commit violent crime. In addition, they are 20% more likely to reach middle to high income status by their mid-30s. More research has been done on the effect of fatherlessness than the effect of motherlessness because it's more common. And research shows that children without fathers are twice as likely to drop out of high school and 3 times more likely to end up in juvenile justice systems. It's a heartbreaking reality, but it's one we can't ignore. It's extremely important for fathers to be in the picture. Dads, with their natural authority and protective instincts, can be powerful role models for their sons, teaching them respect and responsibility. And for daughters, a loving, involved father can boost their self-esteem, reduce the risk of teen pregnancy, and set the standard for healthy relationships with men. It's a ripple effect that impacts their entire lives. The process of conceiving a human being is a male-female affair, so it's only logical, reasonable, and yes, natural that the rearing of the child should be as well. There's a reason that biology requires us to have a male and a female to conceive a child. And we're playing with fire when we try to play God and do things differently than He intended. Of course, many of these situations of children becoming fatherless are due to the mother and father separating. But new trends also show that women are intentionally becoming single mothers through artificial insemination. You heard that correctly. Women are becoming pregnant without the help of a man on purpose to intentionally become single mothers. This in large part is due to the feminist movement because it tells women that relying on a man for anything is anti-woman and that women can do anything they want without a man's help. To put it bluntly, women are being socially engineered to hate men, or at least to repel men with their feminist attitudes. Seemingly, that is now extended to the process of childbearing. It's a movement called Single Mothers by Choice, and it was started by a psychoanalyst named Jane Mattis. Check this out.
Do you remember the moment you thought, I'm going to have a baby on my own?
I do. I was with my best friend, and I said, I don't have a partner. I need to be a mom.
She emptied her savings to cover fertility treatments, ultimately using sperm donated by a friend. After 3 years of trying, she had Zola, 7+ pounds of pure wonder.
And then it was, oh my gosh, I'm taking home a human.
Oh my gosh, I'm taking home a human. It just goes to show that not a lot of thought was put into this. There was just that deep maternal desire, which I can't fault her for. I had the same desire as a woman. She had that deep maternal desire to have a baby, and she wanted to do it at any cost. She didn't want to have to be in a relationship or be with a man in order to do it. That's the flaw there. And there was no long-term thinking. She didn't even really realize that, wow, I'm going to get a human that I have to take care of at the end. So she didn't even think that far. I don't think that she was thinking about what that child was going to need as it grew and developed, that it was going to need a father. I don't think she thought through the impact of fatherlessness on that child's life.
Kodak belongs to the organization Single Mothers by Choice. Its 30,000 members are part of a growing trend, women having babies alone because they're tired of waiting for the one, or they simply want to parent solo.
Tired of waiting for the one, or simply want to parent solo. Why? Why would you want to parent solo? Maybe because you want all the control. Maybe because you have trouble getting along with others. Why are you having such a hard time finding the one? I'm not saying it's easy, especially in today's world, but you should be able to find someone during your childbearing years who you could build a healthy family with. I would say either she wasn't trying very hard, like not making it a priority. You do have to put forth effort. The right one is not just going to fall into your lap. Or there was something wrong that was keeping her from finding someone that wanted to mate up with her. Maybe there's something wrong with her, or maybe her standards are unrealistic. But if you don't find someone to have a baby with, guess what? You shouldn't have a baby.
As a teenager, Ramos dreamed of having a child, not a partner. Modern attitudes have helped make that possible.
She dreamed of having a child, not a partner. This is where we're at, guys. This is where we're at in today's world. It's selfish desires, your selfish desire to have a child, and not thinking about how that will actually impact that child, not thinking about what that child needs, just thinking about your own desire to have one.
Everything I do for her. This house is for her, my job. It's all for her.
Every single thing I do is for her. Maybe that's true now. Maybe every single thing she does since she gave birth to her has been for her, because parenting does change you. But I have to say that it wasn't for her that she purposely chose to have a child as a single mother by choice. That was not for the child's benefit. That was for her benefit. That was a selfish act. If having children is important to you, then finding a good husband while you're still in childbearing years should be a really high priority for you. As I said earlier, children who grow up fatherless are affected by this in a variety of ways. I see it in my counseling office with adults. And it's really sad for me to know that these situations were not the result of some tragedy. They intentionally chose to leave their child fatherless. That's an awful thing to do to a child. Yes, we have an innate desire as women to want a baby, to want children. And when our desire is not met in the traditional way, some women are deciding to get a baby at any cost while ignoring the impact that that choice is going to have upon their unborn child. They're selfishly thinking about their wants while ignoring the fundamental needs of their child. There's a lot of talk in the news these days about IVF. And while I understand that IVF has allowed some married couples to conceive children of their own, there are a host of serious ethical concerns that surround this practice. A shocking 93% of IVF conceived embryos don't survive, lost to freezing, failed implantation, selective abortion, research. In many cases, they're creating multiple babies with the extras being discarded like trash or frozen in perpetuity. Just because science can doesn't mean it should. Creating children outside of God's design is a slippery slope with a dark side. One of the huge ethical concerns of this conversation about IVF is that IVF has opened the door to practices like surrogacy, which could not exist without it. Even in situations where surrogacy is used for a married couple to have a child through renting another woman's womb, it can still impact the healthy development of that child. In utero, an infant learns the voice of its mother, the woman whose womb it is in. And there's a natural process that follows in which that mother is able to comfort the baby in a way that no one else can, because the baby knows her voice and her smell. Human infants are born with a desire for the one whose womb they have been in. This abrupt separation from the birth mother creates a primal wound in the child. It causes them to be always longing for a birth mother. Children born via surrogacy who did not find out that until they were older have reported that they've just always had this deep sense of separation anxiety, this deep sense of yearning for a mother that they just couldn't explain. Research shows that newborns can distinguish their mother's birth voice, their birth mother's voice, the womb they were in, immediately after birth, and they're calmed by it. Infants will actually turn their heads to their mother's voice. And when they do, it lowers their heart rate and it stops them from crying, especially if they're placed in her arms or put close to her face. Check out these videos. Taking the baby straight away from the woman whose womb it has lived in for 9 months and handing it over to a new mother or father, never to reunite with the one that they have naturally built a bond with, is just cruel. And it doesn't just hurt the child. It also hurts the woman who's been carrying the child. Check this out.
I had no idea how I was going to feel. I mean, up until the day I went to the hospital, I thought I would be fine. She was born. The first day was okay. And then, by the next morning, I can remember being in the hospital and just being bewildered almost. Like, what is happening here? I mean, what is happening here? Then my OB came in and just asking a couple questions about how I felt. And then I can remember them all walking out and him walking out and then taking 3 steps backwards and looking at me and just not speaking but mouthing to me, "Are you okay?" And me just being like, no.
I think a lot of times when we hear these topics being discussed on the news or in podcasts, these topics of IVF and surrogacy and all of that, it feels very abstract. We don't really feel it. But if you listen to actual stories told by people who have experienced it, who have gone through it, it becomes more real. And you start to realize yeah, I don't think this is a good thing.
Also, at no point in time took into consideration or thought about how it would affect her. From being a baby and spending, 9 months in my womb and then 5 days in my arms and then being taken away. Going from a perfectly happy baby to a baby that's, colicky and screaming for hours and hours every single night. She was like that for months. I mean, a couple of months up until her baptism. But when I went out there, the first time that I would have seen her after she was born was about 2 months later, and I'd been there for, not very long at all. And I was holding her and she fell asleep on my chest almost immediately. I mean, with me, she was more than happy to be cradled and held and she would sleep on me. So not only how difficult it was for her as a newborn to be separated from the only thing that she knew and was comfortable with, but how it would affect her as she grew up.
The primal wound is what happens when you separate a baby and its mother. Babies know their own mothers through all their senses, and when for some reason the baby is separated from that mother, the prenatal bonding is interrupted. There is a trauma that happens to both the baby and the mother, and they both feel as if something is missing within them.
It's sad. It is so very sad. And again, I think people have good intentions. That's why I'm making this video. People have good intentions, but they don't realize the effect that they're actually having when it comes down to it. It is hard to picture what it's going to be like later. It is hard to imagine the effects that are going to happen later. So let me be here to warn you, as someone who has researched this, as someone who has seen the effects of these adults that come to counseling later. I got pregnant as a teenager and had my baby. And I remember specifically, I was walking through the mall with my mom and I was pregnant, and I was excited. I was excited to have my baby and to have a baby. It didn't, I know a lot of teenage moms are afraid, but I wasn't afraid. I was excited. And I love playing with baby dolls, and I'm going to get a real baby. And I remember my mom saying, pointing to a toddler who was throwing a fit over across the hall in the mall, and she said, "You do realize you're going to be getting one of those, right?" And I remember thinking like, "Oh, yeah, I guess I am. I hadn't really thought about that." It's hard to think ahead sometimes, and I was only 16, so I definitely wasn't thinking ahead very well at that age. I think these women who are older, who are choosing this path, should be a little better able to think ahead, and I hope that this video will help. Surrogacy prevents babies from being able to bond with their birth mothers. Studies show that maternal separation, especially from such a young age, has a significant physiological stress on babies, possibly even resulting in the altering of their brain structure. This doesn't even begin to explore the emotional trauma that comes from being separated from the mother whose womb you were in. This includes depression, issues with loss, difficulty forming healthy attachments later in life. Studies show that children born through surrogacy express feelings of identity loss. They feel disconnected. They often have a deep desire to know their biological parents. Guys, we treat puppies and kittens better than we treat humans. We let them stay with their mom for a minimum of 8 weeks. When it comes to animals, we seem to understand how crucial it is for their development. So why is this ignored when wealthy people feel entitled to a child at any cost? You can't give a kitten to another female cat and expect it to bond with it like it's its mother. And you can't do this with human babies either. And to make it even worse, surrogacy has opened the door for 2 gay men to buy the eggs from one lady, rent the womb of another, and then rip that baby away and raise it with 2 fathers and no mother. This is a travesty. I've already talked about the need for both a mother and a father. A fake substitute for one or the other does not count. Children need a male and a female, preferably ones who share their biology and the mother who carried the child in her womb. Many people claim that same-sex parents can be just as beneficial and just as effective for children as heterosexual parents. However, this is not the case. Even amazing same-sex parents cannot provide the unique gender-specific love and biological identity that comes from having a child's biological mother and father. Now, I want to make sure I make it clear that this conversation has nothing to do with the parental ability of the same-sex parents. What I'm talking about is the absence of a male or a female parental figure. There have been studies published that supposedly prove that same-sex parents, children from same-sex parents, fare no differently compared to those of opposite-sex parents. But those studies, you need to know, have flaws. First, the participants knew the point of the study. So they had every opportunity to be biased and respond in a way that would skew the results. Also, the surveys that they used asked for the perception of the child from the parents' point of view. So the parents were answering for the children. Also, the sample sizes were very small. Instead, research to the contrary has found statistically significant differences between children from same-sex parents and children from opposite-sex parents. In fact, in one study, they measured 40 different outcomes of the children, and 25 of those outcomes showed to be different for children from intact biological families versus the families or children raised by lesbian mothers. This was things like they were more likely to need therapy. They were more likely to experience sexual victimization, more likely to be depressed, to use drugs, to be criminals, and less likely to have educational achievement. Many children raised by same-sex parents say that they have a hungering and need for that parent that they're missing, regardless of the love that they experience from their parents. One child was quoted as saying, "I love my moms, but not a day goes by that I don't wish I had a dad." How about this? If you're confused about your gender or your sexuality, about God's design for the natural order of things, leave kids out of it. It's not fair to them. This video that I'm about to show you makes me physically sick.
Oh no, I'll put it back on her.
I know, but I thought it had
Oh, he went there. Oh, right.
This twisted person thinks that he can put his hair in braids and lay a baby on his chest, and the baby will think it's his mom. What kind of deluded world are we living in, guys? Just because he wants to live out some perverted fantasy that he's a woman does not mean he is one. And the baby can tell the difference, because the baby, unlike many adults today, can't be deceived by lies on this topic. The baby can only go by its natural, God-given instinct to desire the woman whose womb it has been living in for 9 months. This is disgusting. This is abuse, and it should be illegal. Children who are unable to bond with their biological mother from birth often have attachment issues that last a long time. These attachment issues include having difficulty forming emotional bonds later, high levels of anxiety within relationships, and behavioral challenges. Since a child's mother is supposed to be their first line of defense, their safety within this brand new world, the person that they can trust the most and always count on, babies can be heavily traumatized if they're unable to bond with their mother at birth. In fact, studies have shown that children consider their mother to still be part of them up to 6 months after birth. That's how ingrained their mother is in their identity. They don't even know they're separate from her until they're 6 months old. And even into adulthood, children who are unable to bond with their mother at birth are going to experience struggles with maintaining healthy relationships. And they're going to struggle with their self-esteem. They're going to have mental health struggles. And children who are raised by people other than their biological mother and father, whether that's a step parent, a foster parent, an adoptive parent, or whatever they are, statistically, they are more likely to experience abuse or neglect. I'd like to quote you something from an opinion article in the Washington Post. It says, "Sometime last fall, our oldest daughter, then 3.5 years old, began telling us that she wanted a mom. My husband and I, 2 men, had known this moment might come. We'd done everything we could to lay the groundwork for her and her little sister to feel pride in our non-traditional family. We'd stocked up on 2 dad children's books and recounted many times the story of how they'd come into the world with the help of a generous egg donor and an amazing surrogate. But at least for our older daughter, none of these preventative measures had seemed to soften the blow of realizing that every other kid she knew had a mom. For a week or 2, she seemed genuinely upset. But then came a twist that neither my husband nor I expected. She announced that she would now call my husband Mommy. And that, in her mind, seemed to settle it. Almost as quickly as she had become fixated on not having a mother, her funk seemed to lift, and she was back to being the energetic, funny, smart kid we had always known. I was happy she was happy once again, but I wasn't quite sure what we should do about this change in title. Was it okay to let her bend reality in this way? Wasn't this too big a concession to heteronormativity? Shouldn't we teach our kids to be proud that they are part of an LGBT family, rather than letting them sweep those differences under the rug? My husband, though, had no ambivalence. If this was what our daughter needed, then he was going with it. I saw the logic in that, and anyway, it was his title and therefore his decision. So we embarked on a new era, no longer Papa and Daddy, but Mommy and Daddy. At first, I thought it might turn out to be a quickly forgotten phrase, but our daughter, in a way that was entirely in keeping with her personality, and that I had to admit I truly admired, made it clear she was digging in. Anytime I slipped up and referred to him as Papa, she swiftly corrected me. If you don't think that is sad, there's something wrong with you. If you had the blessing of growing up with a mother and a father, you know how much is needed. Even if one of them was not a good mother or a good father, you still know that all you wanted was to have a good mother and a good father, that having both of those be healthy in your life would have been the absolute best thing for you. And this little girl, 3 years old, wants a mommy so bad that she's willing to call a man mommy. She's going to realize when she gets a little older that that man is not a mommy. They act like men and women are interchangeable as far as parenting, as if it doesn't matter as long as you have 2 parents of some kind. There's a reason that a man and a woman are required for reproduction. That's because a child is supposed to have a mom and a dad. This order of things was created purposely and intentionally by God. So what makes you think that you can go against nature without consequence? We all long to know who we are and where we come from. And every single human has to have a mom and a dad in order to exist. Whether they know their mom and their dad, they have one. And they're always going to feel a void not knowing who part of them is. Now, you may be saying, what about adoption? Are you saying that adoption is bad? I'm just saying adoption is not ideal because they're not being raised by their biological parents. But of course, if there's a child in the world that no one can take care of or no one wants to take care of, adoption is a wonderful and beautiful and biblical thing. But the difference here is that adoption is redeeming an already broken situation. Whereas what I'm talking about with single mothers by choice and IVF and surrogacy and same-sex parenting creates a broken situation on purpose. We don't want to intentionally create broken situations for children. But if there is a broken situation and someone comes in and adopts that child and does the very best they can, then that's a beautiful and wonderful thing. Children are not commodities. They're not pawns in our social experiments. And we shouldn't be treating them like they're just items to be bought and sold. They're precious individuals, image bearers of God, who deserve the best possible start in life. And that starts with having both a mom and a dad. All of this that we're talking about has its root in selfishness. Being too selfish to stick around and raise your child, being too selfish to be a good parent, being too selfish to conceive naturally, putting your adult desires above a child's basic rights. And if we want to live an unhindered life, if we want to live in a world that is free and happy, then we need much less of this type of selfishness. Because if more children came from healthy two-parent households, we would have a very different world. So let's aim for that. We can't keep sacrificing our children for our own selfish desires. We should fight for and advocate for others to be able to walk unhindered. We need to fight for the family, for the sake of those children and for the sake of the future of our country, because the destruction of the family is the key to destroying our country. So what can we do about it? Well, we can start by speaking out against the trends that are eroding the traditional family, like I'm doing today. We can support organizations that are fighting for the rights of children to be raised by their biological parents. And most importantly, we can make informed decisions about our own families, about the children that we choose to bring into this world. So I hope that you will join me in this fight to think about the kids, to put them first, to think ahead, to think long term, and that you'll share this with others who may be considering something different. Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. This really helps it to reach more people. I'll talk to you guys soon.